Hey folks, Nick here again. So at the beginning of the semester, I talked about the three main functions of HR management, and that is to hire, develop, and retain the best employees. And so initially, I started with just talking about HR in general, and then we went to what are some of the trends in HR. We then jumped into Chester's book on developing culture and old work style versus new work style. And so, for the rest of our time together, we're really going to focus on the three main functions, the hiring, developing, and retaining. And we're going to start with the hiring process in HR. And so again, this is going to be chapter 5 and 6 of the HR management textbook, and we will jump right in. So this is the planning for recruiting, right? So planning and recruiting in HR. So this is the comprehensive guide to HR management, planning, and recruitment, right? So this is how we plan to recruit, and this is how we recruit. So let's start with what we're going to talk about today. So basically, the process of HR planning, understanding the three stages of effective HR planning: forecasting, goal setting, and implementation. We're going to talk about labor supply and demand, and then we're going to talk about how good HR recruiters recruit. So, this is the HR planning process. This is kind of a general overview. So, the first thing we want to understand are the company's objectives. What are the business objectives that our organization is looking to achieve? Also, how do we gain a competitive advantage? Because if we're Nordstrom, Saks is looking to hire the same people we're looking to hire. Um, Nike is looking to hire the same people that we're looking to hire. So, how do we create a competitive advantage over the competitors that want to hire our same employees? Bridge the gap between present organizational and future organizational goals, right? So, what's happening in the organization now, and what are our future goals? And then we want to identify necessary changes to meet these objectives. So, first and foremost, we want to forecast labor demand, right? And we look at forecasts of labor, either surpluses or shortages. We could be in a labor surplus, which means our unemployment rate is super high, or a shortage where our unemployment rate is low. And one thing you have to realize is sometimes we'll have, I remember back in the day when we had high unemployment rate, except in the accounting realm. Accountants were hard to find. Everybody else, lots of people out there looking for jobs. Accountants, not so much. So a lot of times it depends on the specific position. Most of the time in general, though, it's going to depend on what does our market look like right now. Are we in a boom market? Are we in a bust market? Are we in a trough? Are we in a peak? And so we want to look at what is our either surplus or shortage. We want to look at goal setting and strategic planning, and then we want to look at program implementation and valuation. With all that, we need to forecast our labor, right? We need to forecast our labor as it pertains to shortage versus surplus, goal setting on how we identify and get these people. And then third, how do we implement an effective program to uh, to recruit? Okay. So, the three critical stages of HR planning. First of all, forecasting. We need to predict the future labor demands of our organization and what the supplies are using statistical methods and trend analysis. Basically, trend analysis, we look at what the history, right? Where have we been in the last 3 years? Have we been in a low unemployment rate or a high unemployment rate? Do we see that continuing to do that? Is it going to stay low? Is it going to move to a high? And so we really need to look at where we've been and where we're going. We need to look at our leading indicators. We need to look at, all that economic stuff we learned that nobody paid attention to. It matters. What is the price of crude oil? What does the CPI look like? What does our GDP look like? Right? What is production uh, PPI look like? Production uh, price index look like? right? We need to look at all those economic indices. We need to look at what is the unemployment right now, where has it been, and where do we think it's going. That is our supply and demand is the labor market. And then we need to look at transitional matrices. Goal setting and strategic planning. We need to understand how many people do we need to hire? Do we have new products coming out? Do we have a new facility we need to staff? Do we have a new marketing campaign that we're going to require us to hire new salespeople? All those things. Do we have enough people? So these strategic goals and the strategic plan will address any shortages or surpluses we may have. It'll align with our core competencies and core values. And we need to consider varying speeds and impacts of our hiring decisions. Okay. Can't be too slow, can't be too fast. Finally, we need to implement and evaluate, executing the plan and measuring its effectiveness, right? We need to sign accountability. We need to manage our talent. We need to do regular check-ins and progress reports, and we need to look at how we're performing. We need to put that into data and metrics and analyze them. How do we forecast labor? Basically, we look at trend analysis. We look at statistical models that show what the labor market's going to look at in the future. And in order to do that, the best thing to do is a lot of times look at past history, like what happened in the past. You will find, folks, as you continue to grow in business, there are business cycles, regular occurring peaks and troughs, inclines and declines that happen just kind of naturally. And so what we want to look at is, over the course of 50 years, what do those business trends look like? What have they occurred every 5 years, every 10 years? If we're in a trough right now, when can we, which is means high unemployment, when can we anticipate lower unemployment? When can we anticipate an expansion of the economy and growth into a lower unemployment? We want to hire before that happens. So again, we never want to let people go at a trough, and we never want to hire at a peak. We want to hire and let go somewhere in the middle, right? So ideally, we want to hire before the unemployment rate gets too low, because then there's nobody available. And if there's nobody available, we can't hire. So literally, folks, this is all about understanding business metrics and understanding economic indices. So we look at economic indicators, competitor, what are our competitors doing? What's some of the technology that we can implement to maybe offload some of that work that maybe people would be doing? What do our workforce demographics? Remember earlier I said they're getting older and older. So what does that mean? And then what are our population trends? Okay. Those are all the things that we do, plus a lot more to forecast our labor demand. This is a great metrics. This basically determines our labor supply as a company, right? And so the way it's set up is here in 2019, we had a sales manager, sales rep, sales apprentice, plant manager. We had these positions here listed 1 through 8. These percentages are okay. So number one is a sales manager, and 22, number one, 95% of the people in 2019 that were sales managers in 2020 are still sales managers. 5% of them, number eight, are no longer with the organization, right? So 5% of the people who were sales managers in 2019 by 2022 are no longer with the organization. Sales reps in 2019, in 2022, 5% of the people, I'm sorry, we had sales reps. 5% of those people are still sales reps in 2022. 60% of them are now sales apprentices. Okay. And then, or we're saying, yeah, sales apprentices. And then 35% of them are now sales managers. Okay. So this is a great metrics to be able to show. So assistant plant manager, number four, 90, that's who we had. 90% of the people that were plant manager in 2019 are still plant manager in 2022. 5% of them have moved to production manager, and 5% of them have moved out of the organization. Okay. And so again, sales apprentice, 20% of them are still sales apprentice. 50% of them have moved to, I'm sorry, 50% of them have, 20% of them have moved to sales rep. 50% of them are still sales apprentices. 30% have moved out of the organization. What this will show you is how many people are, what percentage of our employees in a specific role are leaving the organization, and what percentage of them have either moved up or moved down. So this is a great thing. What this answers is, where did people in each job category go, and where did people currently in each job category come from? Okay. So this is a great tool for organizations to use. Managing labor surplus, right? So when we have too many, we have too many people in our organization. We have too many people in our organization. We need to cut. What are the ways that we can do that? There's 5 different ways that we can cut people. Downsizing, pay cuts, work sharing, hiring freeze, early retirement. And what we look at is the speed of which we can get it done and the suffering of the employee for each of these. So the fastest one we can do is just lay off people or fire people, but that causes the most damage to employees. And not just the ones that get left, but the ones that are still there. So it decreases employee morale. Pay cuts, pretty easy to implement, right? So we cut pay. Get to keep your job, so less suffering. Work sharing, not fast, harder to implement, but then again, the suffering is low. Hiring freeze, same thing, hard to implement. The speed of implementation is not, it's not fast. Again, not a lot of suffering. Same thing with early retirement. A little bit faster to get done, little hoops you have to jump through. And again, the suffering to employees is limited. So these are all the things that we need to think about when we have a labor surplus, right? When we don't have enough or when we have too many employees. Addressing labor shortages. Here's when we, as a company, we don't have enough people. Okay, we don't have enough people. So fast solutions. We just pay people overtime to get things done. We bring in temporary employees. We outsource work. Okay, those are the best ways, not the best, I'm sorry, the fastest ways to address labor shortages. A moderate solution, turnover reduction, right? We try everything we can to get people to stay, paying them bonuses, increasing their pay, retain transfers, right? And right, we keep them there even if they're potentially leaving, right? It balances speed with sustainability. Better long-term solutions are new external hires, technological innovation, right? So back here uh we addressed labor shortages, right? Or I'm sorry, labor surplus. Here these are the 5 ways that we can address labor surplus. These are the 3 ways that we can address labor shortages. Okay? These are all things that we need to do when we're planning. Downsizing. Let's just talk really quick about downsizing. The strategic considerations, right? Cost reduction. Primary driver of most downsizing is we want to save money. Can we replace via technology, right? Automation, mergers and acquisitions. We need to think about eliminating redundant positions. If we're purchasing a company and they have an accounting department and we have an accounting department, what are you going to do? Now, you may not keep all of our accountants and you may not fire all their accountants. We may decide, okay, let's try and blend them. Maybe some of our accountants are doing a great job. This is a great opportunity to get rid of them. And some of theirs are amazing. We want to keep them, right? The other thing we can look at when we're downsizing for strategic considerations is relocation. Companies move all the time, and we can either offer relocation or we can hire new people when we get to our new space. Okay, that was the planning process. Let's talk about the recruiting, the foundation for talent acquisition, right? So, activities, these are the activities carried out by an organization to identify potential employees, the best employees, right? This is what builds a supply of a potential hires. You may not A recruiter, even during downtimes, is still recruiting, talking to people, meeting new people, because you never know when a potential recruit is going to actually turn into an employee. So recruiters' only jobs are to meet people, meet talent, right? Talent acquisition. I always tell my students, you want to connect with people on LinkedIn, connect with recruiters because you're doing their job for them, right? So the job choice, when we look at this, right? Personnel policies, right? So we need to look at the vacancy characteristics of a position, right? We need to look at recruiter traits and behaviors. Are recruiters doing what they're supposed to do? Are they exemplifying the core values of our company? If our company's core value is speed and customer service, and they're treating new recruits slowly and poorly, you got an issue, right? So we have to review that. And then finally, we have to review our recruiting resources, right? Where are people coming from? We then look at vacancy characteristics. What are our jobs offering that other jobs aren't offering? And then we look at applicant characteristics. Who are the best people that we can find? All that culminates into a job choice. Internal versus external recruiting. Internal recruiting, it's all about keeping the people that we already have. What are the advantages? Generates well-known applicants, realistic job expectations, faster and cheaper process, creates career advancement opportunities, and it improves employee morale. External recruiting, that's going out and recruiting new people, brings in a fresh perspective, fills specialized or entry level positions, expands the talent pool. Again, you might not hire these people. You're recruiting. Recruiting doesn't mean hiring. Recruiting is all about going out and finding people. Introduces diversity of experience and diversity, and then no internal political implications. In other words, that person didn't get that job because they knew somebody. Okay. External recruitment sources, direct applicants. So these are how do we go out and find people, right? Direct applicants and referrals, right? Self-selected at candidates. We post a job, people self-select, okay? Or somebody internally refers somebody. Patagonia almost only takes referrals. Almost only takes referrals. The other one, job search platforms like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, LinkedIn, right? Social media, again, LinkedIn, uh, Facebook, all the social media, right? And so again, how are we out finding people? Your recruiters should be at networking events. They should be at American Marketing Association events, Cal CPA events. They should be out there meeting people. Their only job, a recruiter's only job, is to meet new people. Those new people potentially turn into potential recruits, which then turn into employees. Here's the top recruiting resources based on US job applications. Usually it's the company website. Next is Indeed, LinkedIn, Facebook, ZipRecruiter, Google, employer referrals, recruiters. I'm a big fan of Google now. I use Google a lot to do job search for my students. And so I use it a lot. It kind of pulls from everywhere. So that's kind of my take on that. How do we evaluate the quality of a source? It's basically the yield ratio and the cost per hire. The yield ratio is basically a percentage of applicants who move from one stage of the recruitment selection process to the next stage, right? So from initial resume screen to phone screen, from phone screen to in-person interview to group department interview to offer. And so what you want to look at, what percentage of those applicants that you brought in, if you brought in 100 applicants and half of them moved into phone screen, well, that's a 50% yield ratio. But then at the end, if only two made it and you offered it 1 to 1, right? You compare the yield ratios of different sources to determine. So if I got 50% of my recruits from Indeed, well, then what is that? Is that if my initial candidate winds up coming from an internal referral, right? So we want to look at where we're recruiting from, and the yield ratios of those. If we find most of the time we're getting our recruits from our company website, well, that's great. That's ideal. That's free, pretty much. If we're going to have to pay Indeed or pay on LinkedIn or pay ZipRecruiter, we want to make sure that the cost per hire, that where we get into cost per hire, it's much lower. So again, we want to look at the yield ratio, the percentage of applicants who move from one stage of a recruitment process to the other, and based on where we found them. And then the total cost per hire. Total amount spent to fill the vacancy, divide that amount spent using recruitment source by amount of hires from that source. We want to look at low cost per hire indicates an efficient recruiting resource. A lot of times, folks, you can just go out and buy people. That's not the most efficient way to do it, right? What you want to do is what's best for your company. And so that's why the yield ratio and the cost per hire ratio are great because some companies just throw out a bunch of jobs out there on LinkedIn, on Indeed, and they don't really care. It doesn't work for, I mean, it works for them, whatever works for them. But when you want to be more efficient with your recruiter, a mid-sized, smaller company, you need to really look at the yield ratio. You need to make sure the money that you're spending is worth the money that you're spending to find top quality candidates. So, okay, that's the planning and recruitment in a short amount of time as possible. The chapter really gets more into this, so read the chapter. This is chapter 5. We will get into chapter 6, the actual selection of candidates. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later.